Today, we're looking at the top 10 most viewed how to lunge videos on YouTube, and we're looking to see whether they give the same advice. I mean, is a lunge a lunge? Is it a fairly consistent exercise no matter who you listen to? Or do different videos give you different advice? And if they do, why might that be? And what technique might apply to you and your situation? So, without further ado, let's get stuck into the best advice that the top 10 videos give. Now let's start with the advice they gave for your starting position. Now 4 of the videos mentioned having your feet shoulder width apart. I think this is an excellent piece of advice. When we do our lunge, keeping our feet shoulder width apart gives us some lateral stability. And often when people do lunges, they have an issue with balance. It also helps us keep everything in alignment. Our knees can travel in a straight path because they're in line with our hips. Now 2 of the videos mention having our feet together, and those points become the opposite. All of a sudden, balance becomes more of an issue, and that rear leg, that knee, tends to stay in a little bit, which gets us out of alignment. And if we did this over and over again, it could lead to some chronic injuries or niggly pains with our knees and hips. So I would definitely go shoulder width apart. So the next piece of advice that some of the videos give is to keep your core, to keep your abs braced and tight. 5 of the videos give this piece of advice. Now, I think this is a great piece of advice because keeping your abs braced, keeping them tight, helps create intra-abdominal pressure, and that helps support the lower back. It also helps us stay in a nice tall posture when we're doing our lunge. It doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly helps. So any advice that helps us stay in a nice posture, I think is worth mentioning. Now 4 of the videos mention dropping down with your lunge or dropping your back knee. And I think this is a great piece of advice. No matter what style of lunge you're doing, whether you're doing a reverse lunge or a static lunge or a forward lunge, we want the momentum to be straight up and down. It helps us get depth. It helps us keep things safe with the knees. When we're making the momentum of a lunge forwards and backwards, it can put a lot of pressure through that front knee, and it also forces us to do a kicking motion to get back up again. So we're losing a lot of the work that we could get through the hamstrings and glutes. And often with exercise, bigger is often better. And so if somebody thinks that a lunge should be forwards and backwards, they can try and overdo things and really try to stretch right out with their lunge and lose a lot of the benefits they could be getting otherwise. Now, some of the videos mention breathing, specifically breathing in on the way down and out on the way up. This is very common with most exercises, to breathe out during the point of exertion, when we're pushing or pulling the weight, or in this case, our body weight. And I think this is worth mentioning, this piece of advice. When we breathe out, it adds a little bit of tension in our core. It's a bit like that advice of keeping our core tight as we're doing our lunges. It helps keep us strong and supported with our lower back when we do this exercise. So it's a good piece of advice. Now, the largest piece of advice given was about keeping our knee over the top of our front foot. So often that's what they said, or it might have been knee over your heel or something in that respect. And I think this is a great piece of advice. 1, it helps us keep our knee in alignment. If we're thinking about keeping it over our foot, we're less likely for our knee to be in or out of alignment, which could lead to joint issues later on down the track. Another good thing about the advice is we're less likely to go too far forward with our lunge or not enough and put too much weight through our back leg. Which brings up an interesting point, because there was one video that mentioned keeping your knee behind your front foot. It's not a piece of advice I've ever heard of before. I think it does reduce the range of motion that you can get out of your lunge, and it encourages poor technique on this back leg. It forces us to keep more weight through that back leg. Now, when we're doing a lunge, we're really trying to work the front leg. That's the priority. That's the one we're trying to drive our weight down and back up from. So keeping that knee behind the foot is not something I would recommend. Now, 3 of the videos mention keeping our back knee at 90 degrees. And I think this is an excellent piece of advice, and it's a shame more videos didn't mention it as well. A lot talk about the front knee, which is really important, but that back knee, if it's too shallow, we end up putting excess pressure on the knee, too much weight on that back leg. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if it's too shallow. And vice versa, if it's too long like this, we're not going to get the range of motion, we're not going to get the depth out of our lunge, and we're going to miss out on a lot of gains that we could get otherwise. And I think that 90 degrees on that back leg is a really worthwhile point to mention. And like I said, I wish more videos did. Now, 6 of the videos mentioned keeping a nice tall posture when you're doing your lunge. And I think this is a great piece of advice. It's a shame all the videos didn't mention it. It helps us keep the right alignment, particularly through that back leg. And one of the most common mistakes I see with lunges is people trying to get depth by dropping down their chest or their head, or it can even be a flexibility issue. Regardless, we want to make sure that we stay nice and tall, keep everything in alignment, and get the depth through our knees and not through our back. Now, our last point is where we get probably our greatest conflict. We've got 3 videos that are saying that we should push back up by driving through our heel. And then we've got one video that mentions pushing through our toes or through our forefoot to return to our start position. So which one should we listen to? Definitely, when we push through our heel, we engage those glutes a little bit more, and the force that goes through the knee is a little bit more direct. It kind of goes straight down. When we push through our toes, that force becomes more of a zigzag, and it can peak over our knee and over our patella. So it can cause a little bit more knee pressure than pushing through the heel. Also, when we push through our forefoot, it becomes a slight kicking motion, which means the quads are working a little bit more. Not that that's a bad thing, but I would say pushing through the heel is a more balanced approach of working the glutes and the thighs rather than that kicking motion. Now, there's a few notable mentions, a few videos that mention something that none of the other videos did. Now, Mind Pump TV gave a really great piece of advice where he talked about at the bottom of your lunge, keeping your shoulders, hips, and knee all in one straight line. And I think that's a really good piece of advice. I've never thought or heard that advice before, and it's probably something that I'll start to include as well, because if you do keep those shoulders, hips and knees all in one line, you should really have a nice alignment, a nice posture at the very end of your lunge. And that's often where people go wrong with their lunges. Another video worth mentioning was Passion for Profession, who mentioned that when you do your lunge, you shouldn't bring your hips too far forward. Now, she's not wrong. If you were to bring your hips too far forward, that would be an issue. But what is too far? It wasn't really clarified, and I find that piece of advice odd because normally when someone does a lunge, the issue is the hips are too far back. They're not forward enough. So I haven't really come across a client who's off the bat done it with their hips too far forward. It's a little bit odd in that case, but like I said, she's not wrong, it's just really uncommon. So at the end of this, what's the best conclusion we can come to? Well, one, we can definitely say that all the videos aren't giving you the same advice. Some are giving you advice that's a little bit different to others, or maybe they're not mentioning things that are kind of important and they should be. So for that reason, I definitely watch a few videos to get a well-rounded approach on how to do an exercise before you jump in there and start doing it. I think it's a really good sign if they explain why you should do something or why you shouldn't do something. At least then you get a better understanding of what you should be avoiding or encouraging. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, drop a like and check out some of my other videos where I go through techniques of exercises, and I've got some other comparison videos coming up soon. So if you like this one, let me know and I'll pump some more out as quick as I can. I'll see you soon.